Welcome to our notes on converting between linear forms. Students will be able to convert a linear equation between slope-intercept and standard form and be able to rearrange an equation to isolate any variable. So there are three forms of a linear equation. The slope-intercept form of the linear equation is y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. The standard form of a linear equation is ax plus by equals c, where a and b are coefficients of x and y respectively, and c is a constant. And we also have the point-slope form of a linear equation, which is y minus y1 equals m times the quantity of x minus x1, where m is the slope and x1, y1 is a point on the line. So in this example, we are going to practice manipulating this equation. This is the slope-intercept form of a linear equation because it's in y equals mx plus b. We're being asked to solve for x. Now, we're not given a y value this time, which means we're going to create an equivalent equation, but x will be by itself instead. So that means we're going to isolate x. We're going to get it by itself. In order to do that, we're going to use a graphic organizer. Okay, so like anything in math, there are multiple ways that you can approach this problem. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to create a t-table, and we're going to practice our order of operations. We're going to practice saying what our steps are. So we're going to plan our steps. So in the upper left corner, you're going to write PEMDAS for our order of operations. And then you're going to write inverse. So this is the side that's going to tell us what to do. But we can't get to that side unless we figure out what are the order of operations for this equation. So let's say I gave you an x value, like let's say I gave you x equals 2. What will be the first thing you do? Well, you start with the x value, right? You start with 2 if it was 2. And then, according to the order of operations, multiplication is next. We don't have parentheses or exponents. So multiplication comes next. We multiply that 2 by 4. And lastly, we will subtract 5. When we actually calculate it, we will end up with the y value that we wanted. So we don't actually have x equals 2. We're just going to start with x, and we're going to end with y. Now, I like to think about this scenario. Let's say it's really, really cold, right? And so you're getting ready to go to school. Let's say it's snowing outside. So maybe, you'll put on your shirt, you might put on a sweater, and then you'll put on your big winter coat, right? Well, what happens when you go home, when you return home? You'll take off the big winter coat, then your sweater, and then your shirt, right? So we're going to do the same thing for the inverse. So the last thing we did was we ended with y. So we are actually going to start with y. Okay, so we need the opposite of end, which is start. And the fact that this was the last step means that over here is going to be the first step. So it's going to be the first thing we undo. This is like our putting on our big winter coat before we leave home to go to school. And this is like taking off our winter coat when we come home, okay? All right, so I'll just continue this way. So now what we have to do is we have to add 5 because the second to last step was subtracting 5. So now I need to add 5. And then, you guessed it, we're going to divide by 4, and we're going to end with x. So one thing that I absolutely love about this graphic organizer is the following. It tells me my steps. Now I'm going to write something I do not want you to write. Do not write, okay? Do not write. I'm going to show you what this means. If I had the original equation, my first step would be to add 5 to both sides. Okay, so I'm left with y plus 5 equals 4x. Then it tells me to divide both sides by 4, and then I get x by itself. So x equals y plus 5 divided by 4. Now, I'm going to show you how to get straight to the very end without having to show you those steps. So, this says start with y. So you write y. Next, add 5. Next, divide all of that by 4. And then end with x. So, I showed you algebraically how to get to this final answer, but with this graphic organizer, I don't have to, because you're telling me that you know the steps to get there. So I would like for you to use this same graphic organizer in the you do here. Y equals 7x plus 10. Get x by itself. Isolate x. So now we're going to convert from standard form to slope-intercept form. Remember, the slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. So basically, I'm asking you to solve for y. Get y by itself. So I'm going to use the graphic organizer again to help plan out what I'm going to do in order to get y by itself. So the only difference is, this is kind of strange, right? But like, this is called a term. 5x is a term. 3y is a term. 9 is a term. A term is anything separated by a plus, a minus, or an equal sign. Okay? So I'm going to treat this term as one thing. I'm not going to separate the 5 and the x. Since I'm interested in getting y by itself, I must move 5x over together. Okay? So that's what I mean. So go ahead. If you wish to box it so that you know you're going to treat it as one thing, great. Make a table. Here's your PEMDAS. Here's your inverse. Okay, so the thing you're trying to get by itself is the thing you start with on the PEMDAS side. So we're going to start with y because we're interested in it. And the next thing that happens to y is that y gets multiplied by 3. And then there's like a little invisible plus sign here because this is a positive 5x. So I'm adding 5x. And then end with signals the equal sign. We're going to end with 9. Okay? So now here comes the inverse. If we ended with 9, we have to undo that first. So we're going to start with 9. Then we have to undo this one. We're going to subtract 5x. Then undo that one. Divide by 3. Lastly, undo this. End with y. So remember, this side tells us what we need to do algebraically. Since you've already written out the steps, let's actually write what we need to. We're going to start with 9. We're going to subtract 5x. We're going to divide that whole thing by 3, and we're going to end with y. So look, we got y by itself. But now we kind of need to rearrange and manipulate this a little bit more so that it looks like y equals mx plus b. Okay, so first things first, we're used to seeing y on the other side. We could leave y right here. It's fine too. But, let's just get back into the habit of seeing y equals mx plus b. So y equals 9 minus 5x equals 3. I just switched the sides. This is the same thing as like a equals b or b equals a. Either way, it's equivalent. Okay? So now we have to remember, how do we separate fractions like this? If there's a plus or a minus here, then what we need to do is y equals 9 divided by 3, but also minus 5x divided by 3. Okay? Now, we're going to simplify some more because we can simplify some things. Y equals, well, what's 9 divided by 3? It's 3. And you can either write it the next one the same way because 3 doesn't go into 5 evenly. Or you could rewrite it like minus 5/3 with the big X. Now, this is y equals b plus mx. So now let's rearrange it. Let's do another equivalence equation. So y equals the m value is actually negative 5/3. Negative 5/3 x. And then this is a positive 3, so I'm going to say plus 3. So now this looks like what we're used to seeing, y equals mx plus b. So all of these are equivalent. This is what we got from our graphic organizer. But since we're being asked to put things in slope-intercept form, that should be our final answer. Now, I would like for you to try converting the standard form to the slope-intercept form, meaning solve for y. Please go ahead and write the graphic organizer because I think that will help a lot of you. Come back to page 1 and go ahead and write 3 questions. So you should have a question where this is the answer to it. You should have a question here, and you should have a question here.